After 9 days of loading cargo, our ship was ready to start the voyage to our next port. But at the moment, we were running low on fuel, which is why we transferred to a nearby anchorage area to carry out bunkering operations. After calculating the distance to our next port, we will need an additional 400 tons of heavy fuel oil in order for our ship to reach our destination.
So while we were at the anchorage area, we have been waiting for the bunker barge to come, but apparently bunkering was not allowed at our position. So last night we had to move again, and we arrived just now here at a different location farther away, and now the barge is approaching our ship.
Bunkering is a maritime term for fuel replenishment. The term bunker fuel dates back to steam-powered ships which used coal as fuel and stored them inside of coal bunkers on board the ship. Today, in place of coal bunkers, ships now have fuel oil tanks. But the name got stuck, which is why ship's fuel is still referred to as bunkers. As the bunker barge was approaching on our starboard side, the engine crew was preparing the manifold for hose connection. The flange was opened, and oil spill prevention materials were made ready as standard procedure in case an oil leak happens. A few days before bunkering operation, it is standard practice to brief the crew on the details, which tanks will be filled and how much, what their stations and duties are, what to do and what not to do, and so on. By the way, I'm always using the term bunker barge, even though it's obvious that what's approaching us is actually a small tanker ship. Bunker barge is just another term that we've gotten used to because it got carried over from the old days. Anyway, as the barge was making its final approach for STS or ship-to-ship operation, the bosun and the rest of the deck team were on standby to receive the mooring lines and make fast. With both of the ship's crew working in unison, the whole process was done in a matter of minutes.
Now the barge is alongside, and now we're connecting the hose.
The next step is to connect the hose to our bunker manifold. The hose has to be carefully laid out and secured, as it has a tendency to move around, especially in the case of ship-to-ship operations. Looking at their hose flange, it is quite smaller than the flange on our manifold, so we will be needing an adapter. Bunker fuel is a black, viscous liquid substance which floats on the water and causes massive pollution if spilled at sea. This is why, during hose connection, it is very important to make things as secure as possible, and there can be no room for errors or leakages of any kind. We will also need to attach a fuel sampling flange, which is designed to take a continuous oil drip from the flowing oil and store it in a container specifically designed to be attached to the sampler. After making sure that the flanges were tight, the hose itself was secured by ropes and supported by the hose crane.
Okay, so now the hose is connected and we're just sending the third engineer off to the barge to carry out sounding.
It's also standard practice to send one of the engineers to the barge and carry out initial sounding of their tanks. This is done that if in case there will be a huge discrepancy in the final quantities delivered, we will be able to compare their figures to ours.
So after all the preliminary documents have been signed and both ships have already agreed, it's now time to start pumping.
At the start of the operations, the Bravo flag has been raised, which signifies that our ship is taking in, discharging, or carrying dangerous cargo. As the pumping commenced, the initial transfer rate was slow, and with our instructions, it will be gradually increased. As soon as oil started to drip from our sampler, we connected the container to collect it. This sample will be transferred to smaller bottles, and one of those will be sent to a laboratory for analysis and determine if the fuel is safe to be used for our engine. Another one will be given to the barge, and the others will be kept on board the ship. Initial sounding of our tanks were also carried out to confirm that fuel is going into the correct tanks. Once we verified that the level was rising, we gave the signal to increase the pumping rate.
So once pumping has already started, the only thing to do is to continuously monitor the tank levels by sounding every few minutes or so, then continuously reporting so we can calculate how much fuel has been loaded already into the nominated tanks. This is very important so as to avoid any overflow happening and prevent oil spills.
As the bunkering operation was ongoing, everyone was at their stations, performing the roles that were assigned to them. As we were only taking in 400 tons of bunker fuel, the pumping just took over an hour to complete. Soon enough, it was time to purge the line by carrying out a few blows of compressed air.
So the next step is to calculate how much was loaded into our tanks.
A few minutes after the air blow, the final soundings were taken. Using that information, I did the calculations and came up with the final quantity loaded into our tanks. Okay, so all figures were good. I've already signed the delivery receipt and we've already taken the samples. The only thing that's left to do is to cast off. The bunkering operation was completed with no incidents, and since there wasn't any quantity disputes, I gave the order to disconnect the hose and secure the manifold. The barge was also preparing to go, so our deck team went to their stations and started casting off the lines. As soon as the barge secured their ropes, they started their engine and slowly went underway. It was a smooth and successful operation for both our ships. For their side, having safely delivered their cargo, for us, having safely received our fuel, which we now have more than enough of to safely reach our next port.